So we've been fighting against this tremendously in the city of Detroit. Mass demonstrations, mass outreach, mass organizing to build a fight back movement. And that's the only way these problems are going to be solved. We have an African-American mayor. We have a majority African-American city. Today we even have an African-American president. Yet the economic crisis in the African-American community far outstrips any other community throughout the length and breadth of America. Even on a national level, African-Americans still have the largest unemployment rate of any other national group in this country. So we have no other solution except to organize independently. And we have to build a united front with other nationally oppressed groups, with progressive working class elements here in the city of Detroit and throughout the country. And this is what we've been trying to do. This is what we've been raising seriously over the last several months and over the last several years. So I want to end right there, and we can take up these questions further during the question and answer period. But thank you so much for coming. Welcome to Detroit, and hopefully we can have some serious discussion on how to address these monumental problems that have been affecting us here in the city. Thank you very much.
Before we get to our next speaker, one thing that had me, I kept thinking about during your talk is, one thing that separates Workers' World Party from so many of the other parties that are represented here is the uncompromising anti-racist stand of the party. Whether it was in 1973 where some parties were saying, oh, we have to negotiate, we are, busing maybe these racist elements that are attacking and blowing up school buses, maybe we should compromise with them. Workers' World Party said, no, defend busing, defend, the community's right to stop the resegregation of schools, whether it was all of that, and Fred, who's going to be our next speaker, was, his first demonstration he's told me about was in 1963 when George Lincoln Rockwell, the head of the American Nazi Party, went to speak in New York City, and Fred Goldstein was in the street with hundreds of thousands of other New York youth. That eventually, the governor of New York prevented Rockwell, told Rockwell, the head of the Nazis, turn around, because there's no way there's going to be peace in New York City if Rockwell entered the city. That was in, what was it, 1963?
It was 1962, but Luke's County.
Yes. That's one aspect of Workers' World Party is we are not, racism is the ugly enemy of the working class. It's not something you negotiate with, it's not something you help with, it's something that needs to be destroyed, and the working people need to come together and tear down a system that breeds the ugly racist oppression of the people. So Fred is the author of a book which is over there. It's just come out. It's a groundbreaking work. It's called Low Wage Capitalism, and it gets into an economic analysis from the understanding of capitalism and the laws of how it operates, about how this system operates and what kind of phase we're in now, and how we can fight back and eventually win the socialist society that is the goal. So with no further ado, here's Fred Goldstein, member of the Secretariat, leading comrade in the Workers' World Party. Thank you.
First, I want to thank Gary for this tremendous piece. That was a tremendous presentation, and we all learned from it. I learned from it myself. I remember the Algiers Motel massacre in 1967, where the police just went in and just killed people in the motel, just for vengeance, just for racist revenge. It was a very infamous incident, and we covered it in our paper, and we tried to help in the defense afterwards. But I want to shift the discussion somewhat, because everything that Abraham talked about is everything that Abraham described is the result of an economic system. It's the result of the system that we live in. And if we want to abolish the kinds of racist and oppressive crimes that were described, we have to think about the system that creates it. I want to not try to put everybody on the spot, but who here has a a definition of their own of capitalism? Raise your hand. Anybody who has a sort of feels that they know what capitalism is? All right. How many people haven't thought about the question of what capitalism is? I'm bringing it up because, especially for young people, it's the most important question that you can ask yourself if you're projecting into the future and trying to understand what kind of society you are growing up in and in which you're going to mature and live out your life. This is a very important question because the system, and for older folks too, let me just say, they've been through the ups and downs of capitalism. But if you think about the system and its economic laws, then you have to look into the future and say, well, what is coming? Now, there's no sense of crisis in the media now, in the newspapers, on television. There's no sense of economic crisis. That they've sort of relaxed. And that's because the stock market has gone up several thousand points since the economic crisis raised its head in 2007, 2008, and 2009. In those years, there was a sense of crisis. However, while the stock market has gone up, there are still 30 million workers counted, who are either unemployed, underemployed, or who have dropped out of the labor force in this country. Now, 30 million workers, if you add to that their families, okay, you're probably talking about 120 to 150 million people who are in dire need right now and in a complete state of insecurity, and it's not getting better at all. If anything, it's getting worse. Long-term unemployment in the United States, that is, people who've been unemployed for more than 6 months, is at an all-time record high since they ever began keeping the statistics. So you don't get a sense of crisis, economic crisis, when you turn on the TV or when you read the newspaper. But for those 120 to 150 million people, every day is a crisis. Every day is a crisis. Am I going to be able to pay my rent? Am I going to be able to, are my kids going to be able to have a good meal? Etc., etc. So there's a smoldering, underlying crisis in the United States, and it's the result of capitalism. Now, you could say, well, capitalism is having a bad time at the moment, but like always, it'll straighten itself out. Things will come back up. And people will go back to work. Industry will be humming again. Stores will be selling again. People will be buying again. And we'll get through it. Yes, there's suffering, but we'll get through it. But that's a questionable assumption. And everybody, especially young people who happen to go out into the job market, probably could get a good feel for